He will come back to order. Senator Ayotte.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank you, Senator Hagel, for your service to our country and for being here today in this important hearing, and I want to thank your family as well. Senator Hagel, I think we've established, as I understand it from the prior questions you've been asked, in July of 2001, you were one of only 2 senators to vote against extending the Iran Sanctions Act, the sanctions in that act. That's a vote that you've agreed that you've taken, correct?
Yes.
Yes or no? Yes. And that was when you were only one of 2 senators in the entire Senate to vote against that. Also in 2008, I believe you were asked, you were again one of 2 senators within the Senate Banking Committee, though, not the entire Senate, to vote against the Comprehensive Iran Sanctions Accountability Act of 2008. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, yes.
Yes, thank you, Senator. As I understand it, on October 2nd of 2008, Majority Leader Harry Reid brought a similar bill to the floor. In fact, it was called the Comprehensive Iran Sanctions Accountability Act of 2008, and he brought it to the floor on October 2nd of 2008. There have been media reports that you blocked unanimous consent for the consideration of that bill. Are those true or not?
I was one of some Republican senators who did not want that vote to go forward. I voted against it in the subcommittee, and the reason I did was because the Bush administration did not want that bill to go forward. The reason that they didn't is because they were involved in negotiations with the Russians and the UN and Security Council members to put multilateral sanctions on Iran.
Thank you. But just to be clear, you did block unanimous consent of that bill.
I was part of an effort to, yes,
okay.
That's right.
Thank you. And also, you know, would it surprise you that a earlier version of that sanctions bill was actually co-sponsored by Secretary Kerry, Secretary Clinton, and President Obama at the time? You were not a co-sponsor. Would that surprise you?
Well, no, not necessarily. I didn't ever base my vote, Senator, on what everybody else thought or did. I voted based on what I thought was right.
And also, we of course, the sanctions that are in place now, that bill or its next generation passed the United States Senate after you left in a vote of 99-0, and no one in the Senate, in fact, voted against that. So that has been our clear policy of the bill, really the next generation of the bill that you blocked in the Senate. I want to ask you also about your position with respect to involvement in the global zero. I know many people have asked you questions about this. Here's what's troubling me. You've testified before this committee today that you've never been for unilateral nuclear disarmament, in other words, unilateral actions by the United States of America. Yet this report itself, which you call an illustration, its illustration or recommendation or however you want to frame it is to actually, there are many recommendations in it. One of them is to eliminate a leg of our triad, which is the land-based ICBMs. You would agree with that? That's the illustration that is contained in this report, or you call it an illustration. Is that right?
Well, I call it an illustration, Senator, because that's the term used at the front end of the report, not a recommendation.
Well, let me talk about the other terms that this report uses, because this report twice, as Senator Sessions asked you on page 1 and on page 16, says that the illustrations or this example given in this report, one of which is eliminating a leg of our triad, nuclear triad, could be implemented unilaterally. So here's what I'm struggling with. Why would you ever put your name on a report that is inherently inconsistent with what you're telling us today is that you've never been for unilateral disarmament as a possibility?
Well, it's not inconsistent, I don't believe, Senator, but you use the term could. That's a pretty important operative word in the report. The report does not recommend we do these things. The report says could, illustrative, scenarios, possibilities, and you probably know the 4 other individuals who were involved in that report, mainly General Cartwright, former strategic commander. And
Senator Hagel, I know we don't have a lot of time here. I don't dispute the qualifications or the service of the prior individuals, the other individuals that are involved in this report. But of all the illustrations and of all the coulds you could pick, this report says that the President could implement these unilaterally, although that's inconsistent with what you say is your position, yet you signed off on this. This report also says of all the illustrations you could have picked, the illustration is eliminating a leg of our nuclear triad. So one thing that troubles me is that of all the things that this group could have picked as what you call an illustration, is a significant reduction in our nuclear deterrence. So to me, I view that as troubling and inconsistent. And one thing I would hope you wouldn't do as Secretary of Defense is to sign off on a report that would say something like unilateral, like this one does, that could be implemented unilaterally, that's different than your philosophy or our policy.
Well, as Secretary of Defense, I won't be signing off on reports in the same way as a private citizen, obviously. I will have a different kind of responsibility if I'm confirmed by the Senate. But I don't think that there's anything that also changes my position in that report, because it was a letter sent, which you may have, to the President of the United States.
Just so we're clear, and I don't want to interrupt you, but just we don't have a lot of time. Just so we're clear, you don't view what you're telling us today and the language in this report as inconsistent?
I do not, because it wasn't a recommendation. The report also says, and the authors of it have always said, none of this can be any reductions unilateral, just like any strategic arms reduction treaty that we've signed. Both Republican and Democrats have led on that. Has to be bilateral, has to be verifiable, has to be negotiated. I've always been there, and that's where we have been on this report.
Okay, thank you. May I follow up on the discussion about containment, nuclear containment with Iran? And I wanted to, there seemed to be, first question I would have is, you said very clearly to Senator Levin that you believe that a military option should be on the table with respect to Iran. In fact, I think you said, I do, I have, and I strongly agree in terms of that being one of the options the President of the United States would have in addressing Iran, is the language that you said. Can you help me understand, when you went to Islamabad, Pakistan, in 2006, you said at that time that a military strike against Iran, a military option is not a viable, feasible, or responsible option. And it strikes me as that what you're saying about the military option now, and even seems inconsistent with that statement. And why would you make that statement in Pakistan, that it's not a viable, feasible, or responsible option, in light of your statement today that you do, I have, and I strongly agree that a military option should be on the table?
That statement was made in the context of all options regarding Iran, and Pakistan was where I was at the time, and the larger context of that was nuclear powers, which certainly Pakistan is part of that club. And not unlike what Secretary Gates said about a strike on Iran, my point was that this would not be a preferable option. There would be consequences to this option. Things would happen as a result of it. If we could find a better option, a better way to deal with Iran to assure they do not get nuclear weapons, then we're far better off. That was the context of that statement.
Senator Hagel, I know that my time is up, and I know we'll have an opportunity for a second round of questions. But as I see your quote, it didn't say preferable option. It said was not a responsible option, and I view those words as having a very different meaning. So I look forward to following up in the subsequent round of questioning. Thank you.
Okay.